Well, hello and welcome to Letters Home, a story of a World War II B-17 pilot from Lowell, Michigan, in his own words. And he just so happens to be my grandpa. I'm your host, Annie Whitlock, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, my dad, Mitch McMahon, and my aunt, Lori Summerfield.
In each episode of Letters Home, we're going to dive into letters written by my dad during his time in World War II that he sent to his parents, siblings, and friends back home in Lowell, Michigan. We'll be reading his own words and giving some context as to what was happening in the world and in Lowell at the time he wrote these.
In this episode, we talk about Bruce's trip to Hollywood, his run-in with some deadly Lewisite, and how he really wanted a cottage on Murray Lake.
All right. Well, we're going to kick things off today right away with a letter. And we're going to, actually with parts of a letter. And this is one that Bruce wrote to his parents on June 28th, 1942, after enjoying some time off from the base in Hollywood. It's the title of our episode, Bruce Goes to Hollywood. So in his own words, Dad?
Dear folks, here it is Sunday, and I'm back in camp after my leave in Hollywood. Had a swell time. Chuck Smith and two other cadets went together, and we rented a suite in the Knickerbocker. They were swell rooms and only cost us $7, $1.70 a piece. It's half price to cadets. We went to some famous places, Brown Derby, Coconut Grove, Palladium, and Earl Carroll's. Didn't need much money because everyone's so generous to soldiers out here. We hitchhiked both ways and never had to wait over a couple of minutes at any place. Los Angeles is full of Army, Navy, and Marines. You've never seen so many soldiers, but they all seem to be having a good time. If you can imagine, it seems kind of good to go back to the post. We'll have 2 hours of parade, but still and all, this seems like home.
We got to talk about Bruce's trip to Hollywood. So to tell us a little bit about what he found on these places that he visited, we're going to bring back our Lowell historian, Dale Croft. Welcome, Dale.
Welcome. Glad to be back again.
And you found out some things about these places he visited.
Yes, I did.
All right. So what did you find?
I think Bruce had a good time is what I found out.
Probably.
Anyway, the Brown Derby was a chain of restaurants in Los Angeles, California. The first and best known was shaped like a derby hat, an iconic image that became synonymous with the golden age of Hollywood. It was opened by Wilson Meisner in 1926. The restaurant was designed to catch the eye of passing motorists. It was known for its celebrity wall with hundreds of celebrity drawings, paintings, and caricatures. It is the birthplace of the Cobb salad that was hastily made from leftovers by the owner, which were spit roasted turkey, bacon, egg, tomatoes, blue cheese, and avocado, and a house-made dressing chopped finely for the theater owner, Bob Cobb. The Brown Derby was also known for its cakes, one of which was Walt Disney's favorite, grapefruit cake.
Ooh.
It closed its doors in 1980. Coconut Grove was in the Ambassador Hotel, a sprawling 1,200-room mini-city that included 37 shops, a private school, golf course, bowling alley, theater, and the city's first nightclub, the Zenana Grill. After opening in 1921, they realized the popular club was too small to cater to its country club and movie folks of Hollywood plus the hotel guests. So the Grand Ballroom was converted into the 1,000-seat Coconut Grove, and the LA hotspot was born. It was an adult wonderland, walking down a grand staircase with high ceilings with stars and a real waterfall cascading down the back wall. The best jazz bands, big bands, and crooners such as Bing Crosby, Judy Garland, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, just to mention a few, were regular entertainers. There were theme nights such as Frolic Night.
What the?
And Stars Night.
How is Frolic a theme?
Well, I don't know.
Okay, we don't know.
Well,
We're going to keep
I think
family podcast.
Right. The Grove was also used what was a dinner club with a full menu served by the French chef Henry. It was the site for the several Academy Award ceremonies, including the 1940 show that was swept by Gone with the Wind. Unfortunately, it also was the place where RFK was shot and passed. The hotel in the Grove closed in 1989. The Palladium was built in 1940 by Maurice Cohen, a film producer, who said, "We create the world's largest dining and dancing palace." It had an 11,200 square foot dance floor with a mezzanine and a floor level that had room for up to 4,000 people. It had a circular entrance foyer with balcony stairs, a domed ceiling crafted Art Deco style. Opening night, October 31st, 1940, featured Tommy Dorsey and his orchestra along with young Frank Sinatra. Many of Hollywood's finest, from Judy Garland to Jack Benny, worked there and magic there. Now, this is the one that I think Bruce may have had his best time. I may be wrong. Earl Carroll Theater.
Oh,
Earl Carroll was a New York Broadway producer who operated theme theaters in New York and Hollywood. In his theaters was this phrase, "Through these portals pass the most beautiful girls in the world." That was over the entrance.
oh man.
When you entered the theater, you would ascend a stairway crowned by the goddess of light sculpture, entering into an open lobby, bar, and auditorium with red and white neon pillars with ribbons of stalactite neon hanging from the ceiling.
Oh my goodness.
Advertisements for the theater featured 60 of the most beautiful girls in the world.
Oh my God.
These girls would perform elaborate stage reviews, usually led by a popular star, and shows would change every 6 months or so. The Philco radio show was broadcast there during the 1940s, and during this time, Earl Carroll Wall of Fame was created on the theater's facade, featuring celebrity autographs inscribed in cement blocks. Earl Carroll was killed in an airplane crash in 1948. Over the years, it has made many faces, but in 2010, it became a housing development. So,
Oh, bummer.
Brown Derby, Coconut Grove, Palladium, Earl Carroll Theater, and then he stayed at the Knickerbocker Hotel, which was built by E.M. Fraser. It was an 11-story hotel in 1923. It was originally an apartment hotel with the slogan, "You're home for a year or a day." It is forever linked in public memory with commotion, loud brawls,
Oh,
bizarre happenings, and tragic deaths.
Oh my.
There were 500 rooms and 200 suites, and it was one of the earliest luxury hotels in Hollywood. So that was Bruce's weekend.
That was this weekend.
that's a full weekend.
Well, the picture that I have of Dad with Anne Murray, the dancer Anne Murray, makes sense
Maybe
that
maybe that was at the Palladium.
it could have
Who
been there,
knows?
or at Earl Carroll's, because she was a famous,
Oh yeah,
famous at the
could
time
have been
dancer.
there. Maybe she was the goddess of light sculpture. I don't know.
She's awfully beautiful. Yes, that I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it must have been some kind of weekend if he was happy to get back on base.
Yes.
That's just something right there.
Wow. Yeah, there you go.
That's a good point. When the base feels like home, you know you maybe overdid it on the weekend. Well, that's amazing. It's I didn't know any of those about the. I'd heard of the Knickerbocker, and I guess the Ambassador Hotel, but I didn't know Coconut Grove was part of
yeah,
that.
I've
So that's
heard
cool.
all the names, but researching this out and finding out how elaborate they were. I mean, the Coconut Grove had the actual paper mache palm trees from Rudolph Valentino's The Sheik movie. In the ballroom, they were
Crazy,
hanging,
crazy.
I mean, it was crazy.
Well, we know Grandpa loved to dance, right? Like you guys have told me that, and loved to sing and dance.
They love music.
He loved to
Definitely love
sing.
music. Yep.
He was a crooner.
Makes sense that he would want to go out and dance, blow off some steam. So, well, that's cool. We also talked about in our last episode phone calls that Bruce had made, and we talked about how phone calls worked. And he finally did get to talk to his family after missing their call on Father's Day. So the rest of this June 28th letter, Bruce writes about finally getting to talk to everybody on the phone. So in his own words.
Well, I just came back from talking to you. Gosh, it was sure swell to hear your voices again. I could picture you sitting on the stool in the dining alcove. Got to admit that it made me quite lonesome after I talked to you. 3 minutes are so short. I didn't say half the things I wanted to. Guess maybe I just wanted to hear your voices more than anything else. You sounded as though you'd gotten over your cold. In fact, all your voices sounded healthy. By the way, if anyone should get sick, seriously so, or have a serious accident, be sure and notify me at once. Don't worry why I don't know why I said that, except that I sometimes worry about you people at home, and I wouldn't want anything kept from me. In case of any critical illness, I could get leave, although this would be the only case. It would be a long way to come back, but I would want to be there. Well, I know this letter is short, but my time is limited, so I'll close. All my love, your son, J. Bruce. P.S. I never talked so fast and said as little as I did over the phone.
That PS, that is so cute. It's the sweetest
sweet,
thing. That's a
yeah.
really cool quote. This is why I read that stuff and I'm like, oh man, Grandpa was summed that up so nicely. He was very worried about people getting sick. There's a few times where he mentions, make sure to let me know if anyone gets sick. Yeah, I mean, does this sound like...
He was very
What-
sentimental. I mean, he's always
Yeah.
been very sentimental. But again, we didn't know to the extent of how his relationship was with his parents until some of these letters. And then, like I said, the word before, as I used reverence, it's pretty amazing to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, he's very, very concerned.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's really cool. So should we get into what was going on in Lowell during this time in late June, early July? So we'll talk about Lowell and the world in late June, early July in 1942. So we're going to start with some Lowell news that Bruce reveals in a letter from July 3rd, 1942. So in his own words, Aunt Lori, why don't you take this one?
Friday. Dear Dad, received your swell letter today and thanks for the stamp money. I can buy 16 air stamped envelopes for that $1. Sorry to hear that the showboat has been called off. Although always caused extra work. You were just getting it organized so that it was a couple of days would do the job. Well, when this is over, they can revive it and it ought to be a bang-up show.
That it was. Dale, what can you tell us about the showboat during the war?
Well, I think before we talk about during the war, we should give our listeners a little idea what the showboat was in Lowell, because a lot of people, showboat, what is a showboat? So in 1932, the people of Lowell created an annual project that would lift their hearts through the Great Depression and become a true community event. The show itself was always in keeping with the Mississippi River shows of long ago. A chorus, interlocking, Edmund, amateur, and semi-professional acts all worked together to present an old-fashioned minstrel-type show. In addition, each year the showboat would bring to its stage a well-known celebrity to round out an evening of fun and entertainment. The first showboat was built in 1932, floated on oil drums, and was called the George Washington. In 1935, a second craft, the Robert E. Lee, was built to resemble the old riverboat steamers that traveled the Mississippi River long ago. Since 1932, a total of 6 boats have been constructed, each with special modifications that allowed it to float on the shallow, flat river. With each craft, a great deal of attention was given to preserve the atmosphere and appearance of the old-time riverboats. Its paddle wheel, its belching smokestacks, and its power beam all serve to present a visual atmosphere, while in reality the boat is powered by 6 outboard motors. The show was canceled from 1942 to 1946. A number of factors entered into the decision to cancel the showboat. The biggest factor was that a patriotic cooperation for the nation's war effort, scarcity of help for putting the show together due to the fact that some were helping on farms, working in factories, and others called to serve in the armed forces was another. Also, the government requested state and county fairs, conventions, and many kinds of public entertainment to be canceled. The ledger stated, "Happier days will come again, and the Lowell showboat will come sailing around Cattail Bend with greater glory than ever before."
Yeah. Another example of sacrifice for the war, right? Giving up the big party.
And other people having to go work on farms and factories to support the war effort. Yep.
Yeah, there maybe just weren't enough people in Lowell. We talked about how all those men of a certain age were at the war. So that's a huge part of your population, first of all.
So people would help out to get the crops in, and
Yeah. Everybody had help because a lot of the men were gone to war. So,
And Annie, I know because you're the youngest of all of us here, you don't have that frame of reference of the showboat every summer. And and I do. I was on my bike and coming around starting over by, Riverside and coming around. I'd ride my bike and try to follow the boat and listen to this music. And it was a part of my childhood that I remember.
well,
very vividly.
it was the biggest week in the summer. I mean, Mitch will remember. I mean, it
sure.
was almost better than Christmas morning, coming
Yeah,
down
I
the
agree.
steps and see what you got from Santa Claus.
Right.
And
Wow.
I lived on Riverside Drive, so I got to see every night, all the chorus and the Edmund and all of that would walk up Riverside Drive to get on the boat, because the boat went up the river and then it came down the river. So you had the calliope going, singing "Here Comes the Showboat," and you had all the girls dressed in the southern hoop skirts. And
yes. Oh, yeah.
The end men were on top of the showboat singing, and we had the jazz bands from the high school on the front of the boat playing music as they came down, and everybody walked down Riverside
yeah.
to it.
It's pageantry, yeah.
And then everybody hoped it got around Cattail Bend because sometimes they got stuck.
I remember that too. Yeah, that's so crazy.
And then the next morning to get over and go under the grandstands and look for money and stuff that fell out of people's pockets.
I remember they used to have the water skiing shows
Yeah.
beforehand.
They had a little hydro-
before the
yeah.
boat would come down.
Yeah.
The water ski on the river?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they used to have
it had
the-
some famous folks from Florida that would come and
Yeah,
perform.
we had the little hydroplanes too that used to fly around that Cattail Bend and right up that skinny channel on there. They had that famous trombone player on that was one of the professional acts that would jump off the front of the boat as it came around Cattail Bend and swim to the stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. It's great memories for us
Oh,
three.
oh, yeah.
Andy missed out on that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now it's a
I know,
it's a backdrop for Annie.
It's a little, it's definitely an interesting history part of our town. You know, certainly all the nostalgia that a lot of people have for it. And I mean, it did go through the early 90s.
Yeah.
So it
And-
was around when I was alive, just not, I don't really remember it the same way that you all do.
And Bruce was one of the original Edmen
He
in
was, and that's-
1932.
As a high schooler, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I sort of was getting. I think it's a bit of a complicated history, right? It has a lot of good memories for a lot of people, but it was also the whole pageantry of it and celebrating, you know, like the Dixie Confederate culture up here, even naming the boat Robert E. Lee, and having, you know, Bruce perform in blackface. I mean, these are things that are not acceptable now and
Right.
probably weren't really acceptable much during part of the showboats, right? I think toward the end of the 70s and 60s and 70s, people were
60s.
starting to call for
Yeah, they
getting rid of at least the end men and the minstrel show parts of it.
Well,
Two of my
they kept the Edmen, but they kept them as
Kentucky Colonels.
yeah, I know, it's really fascinating.
So,
There's a lot. Two of my colleagues at GVSU, in the history department, they wrote a really great article about Lowell. Dr. Matthew Daly and Dr. Scott Stabler, and kind of about the racist history of the showboat and that culture, and kind of how it came to be and how the end men kind of faded out over the years. There's all sorts of ideas about who was responsible for. Right, we talked about that before, Dad. Like, was it Pearl Bailey when she came? I think it was her, but some people attribute it to Louis Armstrong, and who got rid of it. So I don't know. There's a lot of really interesting stories with this, and it's clear that Bruce was bummed, and probably the whole town, that they took a break.
When
for
you
this
know
time.
better. Oh yeah, sure. During that time. Yeah.
Yeah.
the current showboat now. We still have shows, but they're just concerts. We have summer concerts, 13 weeks out of the summer. But we still carry on the semi-tradition of the showboat. So
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not called the Robert E. Lee anymore, which
No.
is good. It's just called the showboat.
it's called the Lowell showboat.
We're getting, we're
When
making
you know
some
better.
steps.
Yeah, you know better, you do better.
Absolutely.
Yep.
But one of the reasons that you didn't mention, Dale, that the Ledger gave for canceling the showboat, among all of those things, was something called war savings time, which I had no idea what that was, but turns out it's basically just daylight savings time, but in constant mode during the war. So they listed it as performances wouldn't start until 10 p.m. and wouldn't end until 1 a.m., so they didn't think people would come as much, and plus all the other reasons that you said. So I found out that war savings time was basically daylight savings, just called that because it was instituted during the war, and everyone was saving daylight to conserve energy. So it meant it would be lighter out later, which is why the showboat. But does that mean the showboat didn't usually start until sundown? Like, when did it usually start? I feel like
They would come around the bend during the day. It was still
It was
light.
It was
later,
twilight.
yes. Okay.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
starting. It was
Yeah.
getting,
Yeah, so they listed the fact that it wouldn't start till 10 p.m. till it got dark, I guess, is the reason why they
headliner
didn't want to
was-
do
So
it.
war savings time was year round
Yeah,
for a number of years.
for many years. Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
we're-
what we grew up with.
I don't know when they went to, I should look this up
don't know.
probably. Another correction for next episode. When it went back to doing like the off and on thing, like in November and March. But yeah, all during the war, it was to save energy. Now, of course, people hate it, want to get rid of it altogether.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or maybe they want to go back. I don't know. I'm so confused as to how
So
that works.
it would be
but-
going back to war savings time.
Yeah, maybe people want to go back to
if we
more
have that,
savings
if
time,
we have
right?
that right. Yep.
Yeah, if we have that right. So in the same letter, Bruce goes on to talk about what he's missing back in Lowell, of course. So Aunt Lori, in his own words.
Kind of makes me a little bit lonesome when you tell about connecting up Percy Reed's cottage. Did you ever fix the splintered arm on the corner where we'd go into the island, or is that emergency pin still on? Have you connected any new cottages at Murray? If things were possible, I'd like to see you have a small cottage on the island. It'd be a nice place to rent and also to get away from people when you and Mother felt like it. However, I don't know all the angles of such an undertaking. Probably won't be smart at all.
So when I read this, I had no idea. I'm like, what island in Lowell is he even talking about? I was not aware that there was an island in Murray Lake, so you all need to fill me in, and perhaps the listeners
You are,
that are of
yes.
my age to know what in the world is he talking about?
Well,
Dale, you live there.
Well, I live
Tell
on-
us. So maybe you're the
I'll
best
defer
one.
to Dale.
I live on the island. It's now a peninsula, but it originally was an island in the 1800s and up to
And clearly
early
here,
1900s.
1942.
Yeah. So my grandfather had lived in a house on the corner, and he used to take cows across stones and stuff, and he used to pasture cows on that island. Way back in 1900s to 1922, he was a farmer in that area. So I have some old pictures of it. There isn't one tree on that peninsula.
Wow.
Back in 1920s. So
No trees at all.
no, there's one tree
One
on
tree.
the far
okay.
point.
Wow, that's great.
So, but now it's the causeway. Over the years, the rocks are put in. There was a wooden, and that might be what they're
Yeah, he's
talking
talking
about
about
here.
something
This emergency pin,
Yeah.
splintered arm on the corner. I've never heard of
Where we
Percy
go onto
Reed's.
the island. So yeah,
Yeah.
he's,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you could get there.
So yeah, but now if you go out there now, my grandfather would. He always said it's going to be a city someday, Dale, and he's right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
It's
I
we
can't
got-
even picture it being an island
oh yeah,
ever.
I'll include some pictures in our YouTube
Yes.
production of what it looked like in the early 1900s.
So did they ever get a cottage on Murray Lake Island or Murray Lake?
no.
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 Oh, okay.
There used to be a dance hall on the peninsula at one time too, back
Well,
where
that explains why he wants to get a cottage over there on the island.
He bought a boat with Uncle Bill, and we used to put in public access and did a lot of skiing on Murray Lake. But
I do remember Grandpa being a water skier. I do remember.
you remember that? huh?
Yes, very.
Oh,
And
really?
did we used to go to
Well,
somewhere?
I
in
used to go to Murray
and-
Lake with him.
He pulled his hamstring at 76 or whatever.
Yes, I remember
his
that.
whole leg turned black, and yeah, that was his last.
I think I do remember
That was
this.
his last water skiing.
But I
That's
grew-
probably what you remember.
That's probably what I remember.
Yeah, because I remember growing up
That
and
was quite a
going
day.
to Murray Lake, to the marina where he had the boat. And we went there.
Oh,
quite
we
a
kept
bit.
the boat at the marina,
Oh,
the
yeah.
old marina.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So I did that. Kevin and I did that a lot. Kevin and I went out a lot. I just remember being tired on the way home, and then we would go into the marina and get a pop out of the pop machine, the glass pop, and pop bottle, and then cheese popcorn and eat that cheese popcorn. Oh, you were so tired after being on the lake all day.
When I was a young kid, and my parents brought out there in 1956 or 54, 56. There used to be, just as you turn on the causeway, there used to be a white building that sold ice cream and stuff
Yeah.
to kids and stuff. Yeah, I have a picture. There's a picture in one of the videos of that up on the top. Well, my grandfather lived right on that where the red house is, the Lally house. He rented it from the Lally. That was called Lally Island at one time, early. So.
And the Conleys owned it. And
Yeah, that has all kinds of stories when we get.
It's another
her in one of these
podcast, that's
days.
for sure.
yeah, that's right.
But so he never got a cottage, but he got a boat at least.
Yeah.
So he spent
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of time on Murray Lake.
He did.
Even if he didn't get a second home there.
He
But that
did.
comes up in a couple letters
Yeah.
about how he really wants to try to get a house on Murray Lake. So he must have really loved it. Also in this same letter, Bruce talks about preparing for chemical warfare. So here's like the going on in the world. So in World War I, poison gases such as chlorine and mustard gases were used regularly on the battlefield. However, both sides, Axis and Allies, in World War II had agreed not to use them unless the enemy did first. So kind of like, we won't do it unless you do it. It makes sense that soldiers would have to prepare for a chemical warfare attack even if they never really needed to use it. So next part of this letter is Bruce talking about how he prepared for this. So, Dad, you want to read this in his own words?
Yesterday in chemical warfare class, we had to identify the different poisonous gases. You should have seen that class. There are 8 gases we had to know, and among them were lewisite, chloropene, adamsite, mustard, phosgene, and chlorine. 4 of these are deadly to inhale. Well, we were only supposed to take a sniff, but some of them, particularly lewisite, have a little odor, so a lot of us got too much. There was coughing and gagging, and some of the fellows threw up, and in general, it was a mess. I sustained quite a headache all day from it. No permanent ill effects resulted from our sniffing, however.
I could just picture this. I don't even know where to start with this. Just we were talking about this on the way. Like, this could have done some serious damage. I guess they wanted to know what the gases were like what the effects were.
I wanted them to be familiar with the gases
I don't know.
that 24 months from now when they came across it, they'd know what, I don't know. I don't understand.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean,
guess
they
so.
do that in the police academy. They spray you with the
Okay.
mace and all that stuff so that you can feel what that's like in case somebody else does that to you.
Okay, that's
I think
true.
you have to be familiar with how to deal with it.
Okay.
I don't know. That's so funny. I can just imagine this class going haywire after a few people
Well, there's
inhale it.
one picture in the manual there of them all are in a circle with their gas mask on, and a couple soldiers or whatever, colonels or whatever, or wouldn't be colonels, but are doing gas things in the center. And they're they're all standing around their big circle. So
That's
That was
probably
the
it,
day they
huh?
all passed out. He did talk about being required to carry his gas mask out on pass for the 4th of July, for the 4th of July weekend in case there was an attack on the holiday. So he wrote about how funny it was going to be to see men lugging their gas masks on the dance floor because if they got caught without it, they were going to, be in trouble. So, but I also thought that was hilarious. He's trying to, it'd be a real damper on his fun weekend, having to carry his gas mask out to the clubs. So I just thought that was hilarious to picture. So Grandpa loved to dance. He doesn't want the gas mask holding him back. All right. Well, we're going to finish today with one more letter that Bruce wrote to his mother on July 10th, 1942, in his own words.
Friday, 9:30 a.m. Dear Mother, I've just 20 minutes before drill formation, so I'll dash off a few lines. We just arrived back from athletics. I've had a shower, changed into my Class Bs, shaved, and I'm all set to drill with a rifle over my shoulder for the next hour and a half. Just heard it's a post-regulation that we have our hair cut 1.5 inches long. Don't know what I'll look like, but it'll probably take 5 years off my face. Everything's swell. I feel good, my morale is good, and I'm getting plenty of everything I need. Don't know how long it will be before we leave here, but my guess is sometime a week after next, probably on or before the 27th of this month. Doesn't seem a bit like July here. It's usually cloudy in the morning and the sun comes out in the afternoon. Haven't seen rain since I left Michigan, and I guess I won't see any until winter again. I don't see Hoyt or Mac very much anymore. They're in different squadrons. Last Sunday, Hoyt came over and I went to the visitor's room to see his girl, Kay Kaiser, and Bill Christensen. I think Kay was planning on getting married. Hoyt said she was, but Hoyt told her that he wouldn't until he has his commission. I think he is smart. I guess after I have mine, I better look for a wife. Raj wrote that he didn't want me to follow in Jim's footsteps. I'll probably be 30 or 31 when this war is over. How would it be with you if I bring in a wife about next year? Don't worry, I haven't found the girl yet, and I don't intend to get married until I do. However, it won't be Betty Bailey or etc. Now don't say that to anyone. She's a nice kid and all, but not my type. This letter sure doesn't make any sense. It's kind of a luxury to write when I have time. It gives me a nice lift. But the trouble is in finding time right now. Nevertheless, don't any of you cut down on your letters to me. They mean so much to this army. Also, the pictures you've all sent, they bring a little bit of home with each of them. Your loving son, Bruce. P.S. Hope you can move that house. Also maybe a couple, or was it 3, lots at Murray. Someday we'll build there.
Someday. Oh, man, there is a lot to unpack in this letter. And so we'll start with the fact that Bruce says he's going to be leaving Santa Ana at the end of July. So Dale, can you remind our listeners what comes next after pre-flight training for Bruce? Where would he go after this?
Well, from Santa Ana, he leaves and goes to Rankin Field. He's going to go through 60 hours of flight training in a P-17 Stearman in 9 weeks. Each student in primary is required to make at least 175 landings. As given at the height of effort, primary flying training was divided into 4 standard phases. In the pre-solo phase, students became familiar with the general operation of light aircraft. In the second or intermediate phase, pre-solo was reviewed and precision of control was developed. The third or accuracy phase demanded high proficiency in various types of landing approaches and landings. And the fourth or acrobatic phase required ability to perform loops, slow rolls, half rolls, and snap rolls. So he's got 9 weeks of 60 hours of flights, 175 landings.
Which he calls primary. And
Yeah, that's primary.
we're going to be getting into that in future episodes for sure. So he's getting ready to embark on that adventure. But then there's also the part in this letter where he talks about getting married, of course, and finding the girl or that girl. And so so what do you all think about this? Why would he not want to follow in Jim's footsteps? That's his Uncle Jim?
Yeah, he was a lifelong bachelor. So
Okay.
he never met anyone. So
All right.
Yeah.
So his brother, Raj, is telling him, don't be Uncle Jim, find a wife,
Yeah.
Yes.
essentially.
Yes.
Okay.
and Dad certainly sounds ready.
I mean, et cetera. Right? Like, what's the et cetera? I just love that. It won't be Betty Bailey or et cetera. Jeez, what's
Those female admirers from the
apparently
last episode.
he just didn't have time to even write them all out, et cetera. Well, the Ledger did report around this time that Margaret Allen, the future that girl, was a bridesmaid in Eunice Guide and William Doyle's wedding on June 27th, 1942. So maybe they'll meet up soon. She's already, she's in the wedding for EJ and Bill, right? Is that so?
Yeah, I think it's going to happen.
I think it's going to happen. Spoiler alert, we're all here because it happened. But it's also super sad to hear him tell this very short little story about Hoyt Phelps, right? It's like a throw-off thing, like he was going to marry, Kay Kaiser, because we know from Dale's research that he did not make it back from the war. So probably would have ignored that part, but because of the historical research you found about people that died from Lowell, I did some more digging in the Ledger and found the news article that announced Hoyt's death in 1943, and he did end up marrying his girl, Kay, before he died. So they did get their commission, they did get married, and then he died shortly after that. So not to be like a bummer about this, but that is part of the interesting piece of
Ultimate
these,
sacrifice. Yeah.
these things he mentions in his letters, like, have bigger parts to them, right? He's not going to be a lifelong bachelor, so he eventually gets married. And then he mentions buying on Murray Lake again, right? Like he's really obsessed with it. He really wants a place.
I remember him telling me that he could have bought the whole island for $500. I just remember him telling me that. That probably was an exaggeration.
Is that, maybe that's another mystery to solve. Half these mysteries are just, was Grandpa exaggerating or was that real? That's part of it.
Or did I hear it wrong? There's always-
And again, I spent lots and lots of time out there with him, and and it was funny. It must have been Mom's break at the time, because I don't remember Mom coming out as much. I mean, it was Dad, and usually Dad and the dog and my friend and I, or Kevin, skiing. So yeah, I didn't like the weeds, but I do remember. Yeah, Dad loved it. Dad loved boating.
That's cool. Yeah, anything else about this last letter that we want to say? I cannot get over the et cetera piece of this. This is too funny. He just hasn't found the girl yet, but eventually. We know eventually.
Go.
Well, that's it for us today. In our next episode, Bruce is getting ready to leave Santa Ana Army Air Force Base and move on to his next adventure. So we'll be talking about some of his final days in Santa Ana. Thank you for listening to Letters Home. We hope you continue to listen as we go through Bruce's story. You can listen to Letters Home on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the Lowell Historical Museum website and YouTube channel. New episodes drop every Thursday. The Lowell Historical Museum has digitized versions of Bruce's letters, so you can read them in full along with primary sources for most of the people, places, and events we've talked about here today, plus more. You can also follow the Lowell Historical Museum on Facebook and the Letters Home podcast on Instagram at Letters Home Lowell. Thank you to Roger McNaughton for our podcast music and to WRWW 92.3 FM for letting us record in their studio at Lowell High School every week. Tune in or stream WRWW at lowellradio.org. See you next time.